Hi everyone, welcome to Awkward Author. My name is Alyssa Grasso, and this is my weekly vlog and podcast about my sometimes awkward, always awesome author life. As far as awkwardness this week, I'm a little bit discombobulated as far as my schedule goes, so things are, I don't want to say hectic, but a little more hectic than normal, and everything's a little bit off, so normally I record on Tuesday mornings, and mornings tend to be my dog's, quiet nap time. I'm recording later on Tuesday afternoon. We just had, some ball playing time, some squeaky ball time, so I think he should be maybe tired out and relaxed enough, but there's a good chance, that I'll have to pause this in the middle to deal with the hyperactive dog. He's laying on the floor right now, so he's trying to be calm, but he's not a naturally calm dog, so it doesn't come easy for him. But otherwise, it's been a good week. I have definitely gotten a chance to do some more writing this week, which was nice, and I am moving along nicely. I am happy with the progress that I'm making on the book that I'm working on, which is going to be the third book in my trilogy that I'm going to be putting out in 2020, at some point in 2020. So I am now at 25,000 words on this book, which, I think when I talked to you last week, I was around 18,000, so that's some good progress as far as I'm concerned. And it also, to me, that's like a third of the book. I mean, I'm not, positive the exact length that it's going to be, but I'd say it's pretty safe to say that like 25,000 words is probably the book is a third done. Well, not that the book is a third done, I shouldn't say that. The first draft of the book is a third done. As far as the whole process, I'm way less than a third done with it, but I'm still going to keep my goal of trying to finish this by the middle of October, so around October 15th, give or take. That's still my goal, and I'm shooting for that. We'll see how it goes. I don't know that I'm going to make that, but that's what I'm going to shoot for. And if I miss a little bit, that's okay. I'm already giving myself a pass here. I don't know. I'm assuming a lot of you that listen to this podcast probably listen to Paul Teague's podcast, because I know he's given me a lot of love and told people to listen. So you probably listen to Paul Teague's podcast too. If you don't, you should, because I think you'll enjoy it, because if you enjoy mine, you'll certainly enjoy his. There's some dog shaking going on. You probably heard the chain, his tags rattling there. Anyway, you should definitely listen to Paul's podcast, because he's further along in his self-publishing journey. Self-Publishing Journeys is the name of his podcast, but he's further along than I am. And it's interesting. Right now, he's in the middle of doing a rapid release, with his books. I don't even know how many he's got, but he's just has one coming out, one after another, and I am very impressed listening to it. I get actually almost like overwhelmed and exhausted listening to it, and I'm not even doing the work. And so I don't know how he is managing to do it, because even when I put out my books, in the new year, I'm not going to keep a schedule as, intense as Paul's, because I just know that I can't do it. So my hat is off to him, and, I'm really enjoying listening to the podcast and everything, that he's doing, and learning, of course, from listening to him, but also, like, realizing, like, I just know my limits, and I know I can't do what he's doing. Like, that just seems very stressful to me, and I know it's stressful just to put out a single book, let alone to put out multiple books, and basically one week after another. Way to go, Paul, is all I will say on that. But this week, something I wanted to talk about, because it came up in, the online author community. Last week, an article came out on Medium, which is the blogging platform. It was written by an author, a traditionally published author, who had gotten... I do apologize. I did have to pay some attention to my dog. He's okay. You might hear some panting in the background, some heavy breathing. I assure you that is just the dog. Anyway, what was I saying? So there's an article that came out on Medium last week that was written by an author who was a traditionally published author who had received a pretty hefty advance on she had like 3 books out, and I think, I don't know if this is like the total cumulative advance for all the books or just the first one. Anyway, advance wise, she received a lot of money. Like, we're talking 6 figures, and I think it was like altogether like $250,000. So that's a nice amount of money. I think all of us would love to get that, for our books. Now, obviously, we'd love to make even more than that, but $250,000 is pretty nice. As you know, I've been a traditionally published author. I have not received an advance anywhere near that size, and honestly, all the traditional published authors that I know who I consider friends, none of them have received an advance that is like anywhere approaching that level. So that's kind of an extraordinary situation. Anyway, the article's tone was basically like a cautionary tale, I guess I'll say. It was learn from my mistakes kind of thing, where basically she blew through all her money, and now basically she had no money coming in from her books because they didn't do as well, I guess, as the publisher and she had hoped or whatever. But the takeaway from it, as a lot of authors were pointing out, is that when you are an author, you really have to think of yourself as being self-employed and basically being a business. Like, your author career is a business, and I will agree with that 100%. The only thing is that while I think if you're a self-published author, an indie author, it's not that much of a stretch to really, consider yourself a business and think of yourself as a business. It might not come naturally at first. It might take you some time, to get into that mindset. But I think, as you move along with an indie author career, I think you will see that and you'll understand that. And you have to do things like marketing and things like that are, traditional things you have to do with any kind of business usually. The reason it becomes a stretch is when you're traditionally published, you are also kind of running your own business, but it is such a strange business. So I wanted to actually talk about that angle of things, even though I know a lot of people that are listening to this are self-published or indie authors, but at some point you might want to go the traditional route, or you might just be curious about how that works. And so it's something worth thinking about, because publishing is weird. It's definitely a weird business in the way that it works. And to be an author, a traditionally published author in this day and age, it can be a little bit strange. The way things work might not seem at all natural or like common sense to you, because they really aren't. And, it's an interesting thing, because, okay, as you're a traditionally published author, you are, basically you're self-employed. You don't work for the publisher, you work for yourself, and you are a business. But at the same time, it's not really the same as like, where you could compare like being an indie author to, running a store or, being a roofing contractor or something. You could see the parallels there. When you're traditionally published, there is this other element to it, and that is like the way the publishing world works, which is a little bit odd, because you work for yourself, but at the same time, a publisher is basically controlling everything that happens. I mean, not that they control your career, but you probably have an agent, who's helping you with that. And so it's a strange setup as far as things go. And one of the reasons it's strange is because, okay, your book sells, and you receive money from those sales, although the way that works is when you're traditionally published, almost always you're going to receive an advance. That's an advance against royalties. So you don't actually get any additional income from your publisher until a book earns out its advance. So if you receive, like, say, a $250,000 advance, that's a lot of copies of your book that have to sell before you will see a single, additional penny from those books. So something worth keeping in mind, the bigger the advance, the more you have to sell to earn out that advance. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. I would much rather get a bigger advance than a smaller advance. There really isn't an advantage to having a small advance in publishing, although some people will say that there is, there really isn't, because also, although it's not a hard and fast rule, the more money a publisher shells out for an advance, the more likely they are to, invest heavily in marketing that book, which is only going to help your sales. Well, should only help your sales, I guess. But okay, so you don't receive any additional money, until you earn out that advance. The other thing that's weird is that you don't really even know, the accounting wise stuff that's happening until you get a royalty statement. When you're an indie author, when you're a self-published author, you can check all the time, in the places that you sell books to see how many books have sold, how much you've earned. I could log in right now to Amazon and see if I sold any books today, how much I made. I could see what I, sold for the week. I could see what I sold for last week. That is why I'm able to, do an author income report and put that out for you guys every month, because I have access to that information pretty much almost instantly. I mean, there's, maybe a little bit of a delay built in. I know Barnes & Noble, it says, their sales information is like there's a 2-day lag, but that's it. Now, here's the thing. When you're traditionally published, you get royalty statements only every 6 months does a publisher send them. And it's, I think, I'm trying to think, like with my first book, going back to my first book, like I feel like it was a year after that book came out that I even got a royalty statement for that book. Now, the other thing is if you are traditionally published and you have a literary agent, it'll actually be your literary agent who most likely gets those statements and then will forward them on to you. And again, you won't actually have income from a royalty statement until you earn out your advance from the publisher. Now, the one thing that's nice, that is actually something through Amazon. If you have an Amazon Author Central account, even if you're a traditionally published author, you can log in and you can actually see your Nielsen BookScan numbers. Nielsen BookScan is a service that's available by subscription. Like your publisher will subscribe to Nielsen BookScan, literary agents subscribe to it. And this is how they can see sales data for books. It tracks retail sales, so pretty much anytime your book sells in a bookstore, it's going to show up on Nielsen BookScan. That's whether it's an indie bookstore, if it's like a chain store like Barnes & Noble. It should technically track all retail sales, so it should track if your book's being sold in Walmart or supermarket like Wegmans or something like that. But it can be a little iffy, as far as retail sales beyond bookstores. It should show up, but it might not. But the thing it will not track is almost all institutional sales. That means library and school sales, because libraries and schools generally almost always are ordering their books from a book distributor. They don't order from a store. They order from a book distributor because, of course, they get a better discount. And, money is tight and they got to save money where they can. So those sales, when it's ordered directly from the book distributor, do not show up on Nielsen BookScan. Obviously, that could be a significant portion of your sales, but it depends. For children's and young adult authors, that's probably going to make up a bigger percentage of your sales than adults. I mean, adult books obviously are still in libraries, but they generally aren't in schools unless you happen to have a title that's something that's getting read by high school students or something. But mostly, for children's and teen books, it could be half your sales that are institutional sales. And just a side note here, if you are an indie author or self-published author, whatever term you want to use, and getting your book into schools and libraries is a big concern for you, you do want to make sure that your book is available through a book distributor. There are different ways to do this, that your print book can be ordered, if you have print books, obviously, that it can be ordered through a book distributor. One way is Amazon offers, you can check off through Amazon expanded distribution, and then your book is available, I think it's through Ingram. don't quote me on that, but they do make it available through one of the book distributors, or maybe more than one, I'm not even sure. The other way is to go directly through Ingram, publish your book with Ingram Spark, and then of course your book is available for expanded distribution through Ingram. Now, that being said, I know for a fact libraries and schools to an extent too. Schools use a lot of different book distributors more so than libraries, and libraries use different book distributors too. I know because, I worked for a book distributor that was like a smaller book distributor, but the big book distributor for libraries is Baker and Taylor, and so you really want to make sure if being in libraries is something that's a big something you're very interested in and want to make sure happens, then you want to make sure that your book is available through Baker and Taylor. Again, just being available doesn't mean that librarians are going to buy it, but just something to think about. Now, going back to what I was talking about previously. So anyone has access. If you have an Author Central account, you have access to your Nielsen BookScan numbers for your books. So if you're a traditionally published author and you haven't looked into setting that up through Amazon Seller Central, definitely something worth doing. Just because you can see different things. The an interesting thing about Nielsen BookScan is it breaks it down by geography, which and I mean within the U.S. geography. I don't even know about expanded things because I didn't have access to that data when I used Nielsen BookScan. It might only show U.S. sales now that I'm thinking about it. Not really sure. But with my book, I could see where in the country people were buying it. I mean, it wasn't really narrowed down. It was more like regions. So like, when my book came out, I lived in New Jersey, then I moved over to far eastern Pennsylvania, practically still New Jersey. So I have a lot of, when my books were coming out, I had a lot of events where I was doing stuff in New Jersey, or possibly like eastern Pennsylvania, maybe as far down as like the Philly area. So the bulk of my sales were coming as New York. All of New Jersey comes up as New York, and I think Philly might be a separate region. So like, or southeast Pennsylvania or something like that. So, I could see like that's where most of my books were selling. Obviously I sold books elsewhere, but that was my big area. But then you'd see like little blips. I happened to look, one week, and it was a book. I'm trying to think if it was Ferocity Summer or Shallow Pond. It was one of those two books when they came out. Well, sometime after they came out. And so, there's like a sales spike when the book first comes out, and then after that things taper off, right? And I just happened to, I would check my numbers each week, because I was kind of, obsessed and wanted to see if my book was actually selling, because you really don't know anything, unless you're looking at that. So, I happened to notice that I had 10 copies of whatever the book was, Frosty Summer, Shallow Pond, I don't remember which now. And it sold in somewhere in the middle of the country. I don't remember where it was. I'm just going to say Illinois. And I'm like, how did I sell 10 copies of my book in Illinois this week? That's weird. So I actually did a little digging, and I turned up, somebody had written a book review of my book in, a smaller newspaper out in whatever state it was, let's say it was Illinois, where I had sold those 10 copies. So that was pretty cool. I mean, I don't even know who this person was that wrote a review. I don't know what inspired them to write the review, but that was awesome. A little thing that happened. And if you wonder if book reviews sell books, apparently they do, because that little book review ended up, selling 10 copies of my book in whatever town this was, or whatever area it was. So, that was just a little thing that I noticed. But anyway, all that information is coming from Nielsen BookScan. As far as the publisher goes, they don't really like to tell authors much of anything, and it's a little bit frustrating when you're an author because, you obviously want to do things to market and promote your book, but there isn't a whole lot you can do. First of all, you're not earning a big percentage of income on each sale, so you can't really run ads like you run ads when you're an indie author. So you can't really I mean, you can run ads, but you're going to be losing money, most likely, because you don't make that much on each sale. So you'd be doing it as kind of like a loss leader kind of thing. And I don't know if there would be a benefit to doing that unless, you're trying to make sure the publisher picked up your next book or something like that by, pushing it through sales. So that's, it's a little bit frustrating as far as like you don't know what of your promotional efforts are working to sell books or what aren't, especially when you're waiting 6 months to a year to find out like what the sales information is for your book, and if you're going to actually receive a royalty check or not. So it's that's why I say it's like a very strange business to run. Like you're running the business, but you're basically like blindfolded. Like you don't really have access to all the information that you would need to successfully run a business. So yes, authors are, their own business, but at the same time, the whole publishing model, the way it exists now, anyway, it doesn't make it easy, I guess, on authors. And you can as an author, you can like pester your agent or your editor to try to get some information as far as sales data and stuff like that and how the book's doing. And, in an ideal world, that wouldn't be an issue, but we don't live in an ideal world. So, if you are, I think, once or twice if you ask, that's no big deal. But if you keep asking and, keep pestering for, information, find out stuff, at some point you are going to be like branded a difficult author, and it's unfortunate because it shouldn't be that way at all, but this is how it is in publishing, and so that's going to make them less likely, to want to work with you again for future books. Just something to keep in mind. But so it's, all I will say is it's a strange business, and it's just like the way that it works is, to me, not common sense. And I don't mean to rag on traditional publishing, because I do think, it has its place. It's a worthy thing, and certainly, if I was offered, a lot of money by a big publisher for one of my books, I would, take it in a heartbeat. Why not? It doesn't guarantee anything, but it's one method of publishing your book, and who's to say? I mean, it's not easy to make it as a self-published author either. We have to do a lot of work, a lot of marketing, to get the word out there about our books, to find new readers and all that. So, if you can have someone helping you do that, sometimes that might be worth, giving a big chunk of your royalties to have someone do all that work for you. Now, the thing to keep in mind is the way that it works today, publishers do expect you to do a decent amount of marketing for your book. Not necessarily paid advertisements, but they'll expect you to do things like maybe do a book tour or, do book signings, obviously spread the word on social media, and, get people to buy the book. And basically, if you are not, if you're not doing enough to get the word out, or, people just aren't, finding your book from your efforts, it is going to affect your ability to sell future books. It might not necessarily affect your ability to sell a first book. I don't think that has as big an impact on that, but it's down the road, where if a publisher feels like, you're not bringing enough to the table as far as fans go, and they're not seeing, your book's not getting out there and not being found by readers, then it's less likely that you'll get another contract, that they'll buy another book from you. So something to keep in mind, but there are limits to what you can do. But again, as a traditionally published author, there are limits to what you can do. I mean, if you have already a sort of platform or a fan base, that's fine. Otherwise, you're gonna have to start from scratch, and without running advertisements, it is gonna take a lot of work to build up a fan base and a mailing list and all that good stuff. And you might think, well, if I'm doing all this work, maybe I should be making more money for my books, and I should self-publish them myself. So There are different, pros and cons of each format to consider. One other thing I will say that is weird about the way traditional publishing works. So obviously, when you're an author, you have to pay taxes. You have to pay a portion of your income to the government, just like in pretty much any business. And so things work a little differently with books. A lot of your income comes in the form of royalties, and there are different ways those are taxed. Like they go in a different line. But anyway, we'll not get into all that right here. But one thing I will say is when you're a traditionally published author and you have an agent, a literary agent, one thing to keep in mind is that when a publisher sends you a check, they're not sending it to you directly. They're sending it to your literary agency. So, like, let's say you're getting an advance for $10,000, which would be wonderful. I wish I had gotten an advance for $10,000, but I didn't. Not only did I not get a $250,000 advance, I didn't get a $10,000 advance either. But if you're getting a $10,000 advance, the publisher, writes your check for $10,000. Well, you might not even get the advance all at once. Sometimes they break it up into multiple payments. But let's just say, for argument's sake, they're sending you $10,000 all at once. Well, they're not sending you $10,000. They're sending your literary agency $10,000. Then they're going to take their cut of it, which is it 15%? I don't remember what the rate is now. Let's say it's 15%. So then you're going to get a check from the literary agency after they take their cut of it, and you're going to get a check for $8,500. So that's the advance that you're going to get, right? And here's the thing, come tax time, when you have to actually file your taxes, you're not filing that you received a payment of $8,500, even though that's what you actually received, because technically you received a payment of $10,000. Only the agency took their cut before you actually got it. So you actually received $10,000, and then the agency's cut of the check actually goes down in your expenses, that can be deducted. So just something to keep in mind too. There's the peculiar way that publishing works, and why it's just such a strange. It's a business. You are in business for yourself, but it's a weird business. Anyway, those are just my random thoughts, and it's just one aspect, I guess, of traditional publishing, and obviously there's a lot more to it than just the weird stuff, but there is a lot of weird stuff. And there is, the whole setup of publishing, it's been the way it's been for a long time. And I mean, obviously publishing, they've adapted to ebooks and audiobooks, and have done their best to try to adapt to a constantly changing world. But I do feel like, the model might be due for a change, as far as the way things work in publishing, the way, royalty percentages are figured, the way royalty reporting happens. I mean, of course, I didn't even mention this, but, every 6 months you get a royalty statement. Well, when I go in, to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever, I sell books, I can see very clearly how many books I've sold, how much money I've made. Shouldn't be that complicated, right? Well, when you receive a royalty statement, you need an advanced accounting degree or something to figure these things out. They are not straightforward and common sense. And unfortunately, authors tend not to be, accounting types. There's some overlap, but generally accountants are accountants and authors are authors, and never the twain shall meet. And so when you get this royalty statement, when you get your first royalty statement, you're just looking at the sea of numbers, and it's just, you might as well be looking at Greek. It's really not. It's not user friendly. It's not straightforward. And again, there's no real reason for it, especially in this day and age. Like, you could make it so much less complicated, but it's almost like publishers almost deliberately try to make it complicated to, not try to rip you off, but I don't know, make it harder for you to question things, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, that's just part of the weirdness, and, like I said, it's been that way for a long, long time. Maybe, it's time to update some way things happen, as far as the business of publishing, not just the way books are distributed, but also the way, earnings and, author, publisher relations happen. So those are my 2 cents, I guess, or, however many cents it is, which is, about what you make on the sale of each book. No, I'm just kidding. You make more than 2 cents, but not a lot more sometimes. Anyway, I didn't mean to turn this into a rant, and I hope it didn't come across that way, but yeah, just some things I've been thinking about after that article came out, and everybody was in a little bit of a tizzy about that. So I have a lot to do, and I have to get this all edited and uploaded, and then I'll be getting some more writing done, hopefully, and I will report back to you guys again next week. So I do thank you for listening or watching. I put out new episodes of Awkward Author every week. Try to get them out every Wednesday. So if you're interested, you can subscribe or like or comment or all that good stuff. And again, thank you for listening and watching, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Have a great week, and happy writing, everyone.